The committee has been focusing heavily on what President Donald Trump did in the weeks leading up to the riot at the Capitol and what he did that day. That commission is going through talks right now. I know that you made headlines recently when you said it will be interesting to reveal all the participants that were involved. Can you expand on that comment? He started off the day with this, calling out Republicans for what he calls attacks on Judge Jackson that happened yesterday in the first day of questioning. He implied that some of the Republicans are using this questioning time to make their bid for higher office. A leak like this is essentially unheard of and a breach of tradition here at the Supreme Court. You know, we started the day with 9 cases left, and people, because of that leak, that unprecedented leak, when Politico published the draft of Alito's majority opinion, people have been out here every single decision day. This is the second time that President Joe Biden has traveled to Kentucky to survey damage from a natural disaster in less than a year. Complaints of mail delivery delays became even louder during the pandemic when more people relied on the Postal Service for the delivery of necessary items. You've spoken out against career politicians and even helped co-sponsor legislation to put term limits into place. Do you consider yourself a career politician at this point? The House, the Senate, and the White House are all controlled by Democrats right now, and Republicans are looking to take aim at the seats that are vulnerable. This is one of the last jobs reports to come out before the midterms. I believe we'll see one more. How do you think voters are going to react to what they're seeing in this data? You are the only Democrat in this delegation, in both the House and the Senate. What is your advice to them in working with people that they probably don't agree with on a lot of issues? Independent of these federal charges, a separate team from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is conducting a civil investigation. This is the first summit for the leaders of these 3 nations since a gathering in Canada back in 2016 when Barack Obama was president. There was no such meeting when Donald Trump was in the White House, partly because of his disputes with his Canadian and Mexican counterparts.
Your grandparents were President and First Lady. I know you were very little. Were there any fun memories from that big White House?
Well, this is my first time out here at Churchill Downs, and before making the trip to Kentucky, I had the chance to speak with a few members of the Kentucky delegation about what the Kentucky Derby means for the state. There's actually another member of the House who began serving the same day Rogers did, Republican Chris Smith of New Jersey. But when 2 members enter Congress on the same day, seniority is determined alphabetically, and of course R comes just before S. Former President Donald Trump touched off an uproar when he used his Truth Social account to say that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has a, quote, death wish.
Leading public officials, former presidents, current presidents, candidates, pundits, should not be implying political violence. They should not say people have death wishes. They should not make racist attacks.
Trump went after McConnell for voting in favor of a stopgap funding measure that included disaster relief funds and money to help Ukraine. The compromise on the bill kept the government from shutting down just 6 weeks before the midterm elections.
You're on Team Trump, or you're being thrown under the bus. Donald Trump has made this clear again and again over his career. He will attack anybody at any moment for any reason.
Trump also used racist terms to describe McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao. Chao served as Secretary of Transportation under Trump, but resigned after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, calling the riot a traumatic and entirely avoidable event. Just a few weeks ago, citing candidate quality, McConnell said that it was more likely Republicans gain control of the House than the Senate. Many assumed he was referring to a group of Trump-backed Republicans.
We saw Senator McConnell try to recruit moderate, just sort of less vitriolic, less angry, less burn it down candidates in a lot of these primaries. Once those candidates lost, Senator McConnell said, okay, well, here's what we got, so let's see if we can make this work.
This is just the latest example of Trump publicly criticizing McConnell. Just a few days before the social media post, I spoke with the Republican National Committee's communication director about this pattern and whether the RNC sees this type of rhetoric hurting the Republican Party as a whole.
Listen, the one thing that I can say is we are all in the same boat and trying to win Republican majorities in the House and Senate this November. There might be discussions and differences in the nuances, but overall, we know that we have to win back majorities.
Spectrum News reached out to McConnell's office for comment on the post and has not heard back yet. A former McConnell aide spoke out on CNN, calling the post outrageous, adding it's beyond the pale. Every Republican ought to say so. In Washington, Julia Benbrook, Spectrum News.
We are made for this moment. The pro-life movement is made for this.
And if you're listening and you are feeling the grief, the shock, the disgust, the fury, you are right to do so.
Protesters gathered after the court issued its decision overturning Roe v. Wade, the landmark ruling that made abortion a constitutional right nearly 50 years ago. President Joe Biden warned the health and life of women across this nation are now at risk.
The court has done what it has never done before, expressly take away a constitutional right that is so fundamental to so many Americans.
Many Republican leaders celebrated the decisions.
Today's historic Supreme Court decision is a victory for the sanctity of life. It will save countless innocent children.
In the majority opinion, Justice Samuel Alito wrote that Roe v. Wade was egregiously wrong from the start. He added, the inescapable conclusion is that a right to an abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions. The court's 3 liberal justices countered, with sorrow for the court, but more for the many millions of American women who have lost today a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. They warned that Alito's reasoning puts other rights, like same-sex marriage, in jeopardy. The court voted 6-3 to uphold a Mississippi law banning abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. But Chief Justice John Roberts did not join with his 5 conservative colleagues in overturning Roe.
No justice, no peace.
The ruling allows each state to make its own decision on abortions. The Guttmacher Institute, a research organization that supports abortion rights, expects 26 states will now ban or severely restrict abortion. 13 of those states have trigger laws that go into effect immediately. The ruling caps off a long push by the political right to overturn Roe, cemented by President Donald Trump appointing 3 conservative justices. But the decision was not a surprise. A draft of Alito's opinion was leaked last month. This hardly settles the abortion debate on Capitol Hill. The president and other prominent Democrats are vowing to make abortion a central issue in the November elections. In Washington, Julia Benbrook, Spectrum News. This is the second time that President Joe Biden has traveled to Kentucky in less than a year to survey damage from a natural disaster. In December, western Kentucky experienced deadly tornadoes that killed 77 people there. This time, flooding in eastern Kentucky has killed more than 36 people, with 2 people still missing.
It is true that the people here in this community in western Kentucky and the folks I met in the tornado, they're not just Kentuckians, they're Americans. They're Americans. This happened in America. American problem. And we're all Americans. Everybody has an obligation to help.
Biden was joined by Democratic Governor Andy Beshear and Republican Congressman Hal Rogers, who represents eastern Kentucky in Congress. Both thanked Biden for his swift action on approving a federal disaster declaration for the counties impacted.
We're grateful for the president for a number of things. First, one of the fastest disaster declarations we've ever seen. Congressman and I were talking, it might be the fastest.
The group with the president visited people in the area who lost their homes in the storms and are working to recover. People like Phyllis Bush, who spoke with the president today.
This was our house. That's where we were living, this old house here. The water just came so quickly, just up to her knees, and they came and got us in a boat.
Her husband, Willie, said it was difficult to do an interview because he lost his hearing aids in the storm. During his speech today, Biden promised to continue to advocate for the people here and said that he would be back to check on the progress. In eastern Kentucky, Julia Benbrook, Spectrum News.